Hello, everybody. So, we're going to introduce our immune system, and we're going to run over our first line of defense as part of this introduction, right? So, our immune system is the actual part of our body that fights off pathogens and diseases, right? That means our immune system has two intrinsic systems within it. It has an innate system and an adaptive system. Innate immunity is non-specific. That means it is a defense system that just has specialized cells that are doing jobs, but they are protecting you from non-specific threats, just anything that is not you. And then we have an adaptive immune system that gets more complicated. The adaptive immune system is very, very specific. They are looking for specific threats to our body, certain pathogens, and they tend to ignore things that are not the specifics of what they are looking for. So the purpose of our immune system is to protect ourselves, but we have to have different levels of protection. And because of those different levels of protection, we have different cells to do those jobs. As we go through the immune system, a lot of students can find the immune system complicated and difficult. And I know everything I'm saying is going to sound complicated because when I'm explaining the scientific ways of it, we're going to mention some chemicals, we're going to mention antigens, antibodies, and that sort of thing, as well as receptors and other such specifics of how cells interact. Some of you guys have been through biochemistry. You're going to get that and be like, oh, that's awesome. I totally understand this. But for others, you need a more tangible, movie-like idea of what's happening and going on. So I'm going to try to flip back and forth between giving you guys the academic proper story and explanation for what's happening and what's going on, and then switch into a more movie-like story analogy so you can think about these cells more like acting individuals doing a job instead of getting caught up on the technicalities of how cells interact. Right? So I'm going to try to explain this going back and forth between the two. And before we go on and we start discussing more of this, I'm going to introduce you to the major players in this. You guys have already been introduced to these cells because we talked about them when we went over your blood systems. Now you need to know them a little bit more in depth. So you guys have met your white blood cells before when we did our blood unit. You guys by this point in time know basophils, neutrophils, eosinophils, monocytes, which turn into macrophages, and then lymphocytes. You guys learned that in our blood unit, right? We're going to get a little bit more specific into this at this point in time, right? We know some of these cells are granular cells. Those are the ones that end in "phil." They look grainy under a microscope. Some of these are phagocytic cells. I know this sounds weird, and this takes a lot of students back a little bit, but PHAG is a Greek prefix for words pronounced phage, which means to eat. I know it is pronounced, like in Greek it is phage. In English we normally say phag, right? So when we are saying a phagocytic cell, cytic is cell, phago means to eat. Whenever we say phagocyte, think of a cell that is acting like Pac-Man and that is just walking around engulfing other cells. I will link you to an additional video I have found on YouTube of a neutrophil chasing, catching, and eating a bacteria that has gotten in through whatever means. It's under a microscope that they're watching this happen. And if we were doing this in person, I would show you that clip right now. But typically speaking, macrophages And neutrophils are phagocytic cells. They engulf pathogens or broken cells, things that have gone wrong. That's their job. So think about your neutrophils and macrophages. Well, think about neutrophils as your, generally speaking, police officers. They keep law and order and patrol your body for any illicit wrongdoers that may be trying to sneak into your neighborhood, that is your body. Right? Macrophages are a little bit more in depth about things, and they tend to be more like the SWAT team. Not only do they take out bad people and bad things that may be there, but they also collect some evidence against them as well. They are your SWAT team, sort of police officers of your body. Other than that, you have some other players. We're not going to talk about eosinophils very much because you have different eosinophils that target different parasites, because the eosinophil's job is to target a parasite that is trying to invade you. So typically speaking, eosinophils are the second least likely or least common white blood cell type of everything we're discussing, unless you have a disease like tapeworms, because you have eosinophils that will attach to and attack tapeworms. Others will attack mites. Like, we're talking any, like, liver flukes, anything like that. Eosinophils attack parasites that get into your body. Most of what we are discussing in this unit, we're focusing on viruses and bacteria type pathogens instead of bodily invaders. But just know they are a specific... Consider them like narcotics in your police department. Narcotics doesn't get involved unless narcotics are involved. They don't typically answer the phone calls about petty crimes or domestic abuse and that kind of thing. They are there to track down who's selling heroin. Right? Your eosinophils are kind of like that, except with parasites in you. Basophils control histamine and allergies, but histamine is very important for other roles in your immune system. It helps create swelling and gives off a red alert, like a neighborhood watch app that may be on your phone saying, hey, something's wrong here, we need extra attention. So basophils release histamine, and they control that aspect of things, but they aren't necessarily going to be the ones that deal with the actual bad guys. They are the neighborhood watch that sort of raise the red flags and create positive conditions for your neutrophils and your macrophages to run to where they blew the whistles to help clean up the pieces and the bad guys and find evidence. Right? And then we get into your very more specific and strict things. Natural killer cells here are a type, they are a cousin of lymphocytes. They are more like your border patrol. So they're not like your average cops, but they are border patrol. And if somebody does not check out, and if somebody has a bad passport and you're wanted in another country, your natural killer cells are going to seek and destroy them. They are seeking and destroying things that don't belong. So they are like customs, ICE, your border patrol, that sort of thing. But they're still general about who they are checking for. And then we get into these lymphocytes. Remember the ones I said that were smaller than these guys in the blood unit, but looked like little eyeballs that were watching things? Your lymphocytes are like the secret assassin killers of your immune system. And they can be divided up into two branches. T cells, or T lymphocytes, and B cells, which are B lymphocytes. You guys remember some of these terms, right? B cells, or your B lymphocytes, are called B cells because they grew up, were trained for their specific military job, and matured within the bone marrow. That is where your B cells grew up and matured. And now that your B cells have grown up and matured, instead of fighting on the front lines like the rest of your white blood cells, Your B cells are going to act as the information hub, so they are your secret CIA agents that live in your lymph nodes and collect data, build the plans for new weapons, which would be antibodies and whatnot, and they lie in wait until somebody calls them and says, hey, we need you. You have a specialty in this infection, and you remember how to make the weapons that fight this. We need you now. So imagine your B cells or your B lymphocytes as the nerdy information hub that does all the behind-the-scenes research and building of technologies that help your body, right? On the flip side of things, you need those super secret agent men, like SEAL Team 6, that is going to take the information that the B cells gathered and built for them, and then go and hunt down Osama bin Laden and kill him specifically. They didn't go after everybody in Pakistan. They targeted one specific individual, stormed in, did their job, got in, got out, killed what they needed to kill, and that was it. Those special secret assassin special units of the military, your body's SEAL Team 6, would be your T lymphocytes, right? Your T lymphocytes grew up and then were trained and matured in the thymus to do their jobs, right? We'll talk about all of these in a bit. So, right. We know, you guys have known these different white blood cells for a while. We're going to get to know them for their jobs a little bit better as we talk about your immune system. This can get so much more complicated if you go into virology or like pathology, that kind of thing, when you're studying illnesses. This is just the fun tip of the iceberg, right? We know that our defense systems may be intertwined, but there's also three basic levels of our defense system, which is where we're going for this introduction, right? We've already talked about how your innate immunity is nonspecific, but your adaptive immunity is very specific. These T and B cells are adaptive immunity, right? So you have a couple of levels and layers to immunities. The first two of them are these nonspecific innate immunity defenses, right? The first line of defense are barrier methods into your body to prevent bad things from getting in. Just how you have locks on your front door to prevent somebody from sneaking into your house and robbing you, your body has a lock on the front door. It's called skin, right? Your first line of defense are barriers preventing bad things from getting inside you. So that first innate line of defense that we're going to your first innate line of defense are barrier defenses. The second line of defense are more nonspecific ways of dealing with things. These are the police that patrol neighborhoods to make sure there aren't any suspicious characters around, that kind of thing. We were talking about SWAT teams and police officers a little bit earlier. They would be your second line of defense, right? They're the ones like your neutrophils that are going to be phagocytic cells and just wander around looking as an antimicrobial protein and cell should do for other pathogens and then eat them, essentially. They're going to inhibit the spread of invaders into your body, so prevent things from getting in and spreading. And it's also going to trigger one of the most well-known but annoying systems of the secondary line of defense from your innate defenses, called your inflammatory response mechanism. All of you guys have felt your inflammatory response by this point in your lives. You've all felt swollen. This is where it comes from. We'll talk about that more in your next video, because we're going to pick up on those innate defenses for the second line in your next video. That third line of defense, though, the third line of defense is where we get into specifics when we start creating the wanted posters and hunting down specific bad guys. That third line of defense is your adaptive defense system. They are looking for specific foreign substances in your body. But because they are looking for something specific, it's going to take your adaptive defense system longer to react than it will take your innate system. And in fact, the two of these systems are very closely intertwined and communicate. So they are very deeply intertwined with one another, and they communicate between one another so that they know when to, so that basically the military knows when they're going to be called in for an FBI search, but they also know when to back off and let the local cops clean up the mess and deal with it from there. So the two of them communicate back and forth so we can get the best results possible. Right? We are going to talk for the rest of this video about barrier defenses. This is your first line of defense from your cells and from your body, right? This is why I'm also talking about this in your introductory video, because this is straightforward and simple, right? Barrier defenses are your first line of defense from your innate immune system. It's the first line of defense. And you have a few different barriers in your body that act on this, right? Surface barriers are like skin, right? Stuff can't get through your skin. You have good things in your skin that protect you. You have keratinized cells. These would be like your fingernails are made out of a protein called keratin. Things don't normally get in through your nails. You have dendritic cells, right? Those are fancier macrophages that tend to stick around certain endothelial layers of your body. You have a good number of dendritic cells, for example, ladies, in your vaginal walls, because you don't want an infection down there, and you are exposed to a number of different bacteria down there based upon usage. All that kind of good stuff, right? Your skin is also going to secrete stuff, right? Your skin isn't just a rubber like covering around you. It changes, it grows, it ebbs and flows, right? It not only acts as a protective barrier against most microorganisms just by the fact that it is here and is a physical barrier between the bacteria on you and your muscles and blood inside you, but your skin also secretes stuff, right? You have sweat glands, which sweat has a surprisingly low pH. Sweat itself is acidic. That when you sweat, not only does it give you like a washing type action coming off of your skin, washing away bad stuff, but it's also acidic, meaning it is toxic to some bacteria, and it can break down some fats, like the outer lining of cell walls on some bacteria. So that in and of itself is going to help you. That is a barrier. Inside your mouth, when you're putting things in your mouth, you have salivary glands. And a number of these cells have something in them called a lysosome, which act as a meat grinder and digestive thing for what the cell intakes. So those cells will basically break down more bacteria, right? Your salivary glands are going to lyse and break apart things. Everything that comes in through your mouth or your nose eventually ends up through your spit or your mucus, getting swept down into your stomach, because that's where these tubes lead, and everything is going to get swept down your esophagus down into your stomach. Your stomach is a pit of hydrochloric acid and has a number of protein digestive enzymes inside it as well. So anything that gets caught in that mucus or your saliva that gets down into your stomach is going to be eaten by acid. That in itself is a protection from you. Tears are the same way. Tears are slightly acidic and they will help wash away pathogens. The mucus that is on the inside of your nasal cavity any mucosal surface of your body. It catches bad things that you may breathe in. This is why you have mucosal layers going up and down your respiratory system. Either your nose, because we all know we have to blow our noses sometimes. Those hairs and that mucus surface in there are catching bacteria and bad stuff that we would have otherwise breathed in. You also have mucus and such lining your bronchial tubes and your trachea. Most of the time, that's all swept away by the little cilia on the cell hairs, and all that mucus is, once it's caught stuff, it is swept away, and it ends up in your stomach, like just coming up your trachea and dropping back down into your stomach, just like the rest of the stuff that we've been discussing, right? Except if you're sick. You guys still make the same amount of mucus now that you do if you have bronchitis and you get really sick. The difference is your body's ability to sweep the mucus away. Not the making of the mucus, it's sweeping it away and keeping the airways clean. So you notice this mucus and you start coughing up a bunch of gunk when you have that lower chest infection or bronchitis, because you can detect that mucus more, and it is catching more pathogens and your body is trying to get it up and out of you. Right? All of these are barrier methods into your body and count as your body's first innate line of defense to protect itself from the outside world. Right? Everything else, we're going to start getting into specific cells, and we're going to get into our non-specific responses to things. But this was our first barrier to the outside world. If you have any questions, please let me know. But your next video, we will pick up with that second line of defense.